So I'm sitting home, I guess Sunday, reading the paper, and I see the headline that says, doing the math on California's bullet train fares. And, of course, it made me crazy because the numbers are all over the place. They're still trying to justify the fact that, this thing's going to pay for itself when small children, Aboriginal bush people come out and go, what are you, an idiot? This is never going to pay for itself. And I thought, I got to check in with Stuart Flashman, the Oakland-based attorney who's trying to help us alleviate the aggravation that is the bullet train, because we didn't vote for this anyway. The bond, this was not what was in the bond. How you doing, Stuart?
Good.
So I wanted to find out where we're at. Did you see the article on the math?
I did. I thought it was a good article. It pointed out some of the real big question marks about the cost, and frankly, the biggest question mark is how is this thing ever going to break even? Well,
and it was front page, and it should be front page, and it's not the sexiest issue, except we're going to be paying through the nose forever for this thing. So they expect to reach, like, by 2028, it's going to be fully operational. And they're saying, some experts who work for the authority are saying, it's going to carry between 18 million and 31 million passengers a year. By the way, I love that you throw out those two numbers. That's a pretty big gap, 18 to 31.
Yeah.
And it will hit $2 billion in sales, or roughly $700 million a year more than operating expenses. Now, you start looking at where they come up with their numbers, and they compared it to Asia and Europe. So they're saying this sucker should be at about 20 cents a mile. That's what the cost will be. And they found out that in Italy, it's about, 25 cents a mile. In China, 22 cents a mile. The French bullet train is 52 cents a mile. The German train, 46 cents a mile. Now, what you got to understand is in China, we don't know the real numbers because the state pays for their infrastructure over there, okay?
Right. And actually, in fact, in most of the other countries you mentioned, the state's paying for part of the infrastructure as well.
Okay. So in the article, according to the article, it says some outside experts questioned whether the bullet train fares will cover the system's full operating costs. And this guy, I guess you know, Joseph Ranich, former president of the National High-Speed Rail Association, says, I have not seen a single number that has come out of the California High-Speed Rail Organization that is credible. As a high-speed rail advocate, I am steamed. And I'll just break down some stuff, and then I got to find out from you what's going on. They claim people are not going to, in 2025, not going to be flying airplanes up there because it's so much more affordable to take the train, except for one thing. How long does it take to drive to San Francisco? 6 or 7 hours. You've got a family of 5? Are you going to pay for 5 people's fares to take the train? Or are they going to go in one car, cost about $200 in gas, and go, who knows what gas will be, go up and back? Or are you going to buy 5 fares for the high-speed rail? I think I'm driving my car. Also, do you think airlines, once high-speed rail's up and running, are just going to say, we give up, we're not going to fly to San Francisco anymore, they can beat our price? Or do you think they're going to figure out a way to compete with rail? They're going to figure out a way to compete with rail. So none of those things entered into this. So I've talked enough, Stuart. Tell me what's going on from your end.
Well, we are, in fact, preparing to go into court and fight on precisely that issue. The issue that, because the ballot measure, among other things, there were things that were there on the ballot. They weren't part of the ballot measure, but they were there on the ballot, and everybody, expected them to be followed. But the courts have said, no, that doesn't count. So they promised in the analysis in the ballot handbook, it said it's going to cost $30 billion. Well, they even now say it's $68 billion, and it's going to be considerably more than that. But that's aside from the point. In the ballot measure itself, it said it's got to be, it has to be self-supporting. It can't have any government subsidy, local, state, or national.
Wow.
And it also has to be, this is the term it used, it has to be financially viable.
I'm sorry,
which means
I'm snickering.
It's got to be able to stand on its own 2 feet.
And it never will. And
that's the issue, is that the analysis that we have, and we have experts who've been looking at this, and their analysis says, forget about it. This is not even going to come close.
So how can they?
The European systems charge far more than they're proposing to charge here. The European systems have to pay far more than they are claiming they're going to pay for operation and maintenance. And even so, the European systems, the operation and maintenance is subsidized by the government because the government pays for maintaining the rail beds, not the railroads.
So, Stuart, let me ask you a question. I just thought of this. So you're fighting this, and a judge sits there, supposedly not bought off, supposedly, fair.
Well, it's the same judge who's ruled in our favor a couple of times.
All right, so he's supposedly fair. So he sits there, and he looks at all these made-up numbers that everybody's making. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea in 20 years what the heck's going to happen, 15 years what's going to happen as far as the cost of this. But what he does see is you gave us a number of 30-some billion, and we're already at 68 billion. How much have you built already? Because don't they, as I recall, and I don't have it in front of me, they have to spend a certain amount of money each and every day and each and every month to keep getting subsidies from the government, correct?
Well, they have this full amount that's $3.2 billion, and it all has to be spent by September of 2017. So you can do the math and figure out how much they have to spend per day.
Okay, so whatever that is, how are they doing so far? They would need to be building right now to be spending it.
They haven't laid a single inch of track.
And what
Not
was it?
one inch.
How many dates have they missed as far as laying track?
About 2 years worth.
Okay, so they're 2 years late. We're going to take a brief break. When we come back, what I'd like you to do is tell me how many properties they've bought and how many they still have to buy. And let's go through a couple other numbers and see if we can make any sense out of this. Okay, Stuart?
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks for being on. Thanks for doing this fight. Stuart Flashman, Oakland-based environmental land use and elections lawyer, who's helping us try and shut this sucker down. More Live continues with Stuart Flashman, Oakland-based environmental land use and elections lawyer, who's trying to help us shut down the high-speed rail. So, Stuart, how many properties have they bought now, and how many more do they have to buy to complete the first leg?
Well, it depends on how you define the first leg. If you define the first leg as when they're going to actually start being able to run a high-speed train on it, that first leg is about 300 miles.
Okay.
If you define it as how much the federal government wants them to build by 2017, that first leg is 130 miles. If you define it by how much they're actually planning to be able to build in the immediate future, it's about 29 miles. And of that 29 miles would require them to acquire somewhere above 500 properties, somewhere between 500 and 600 properties. My understanding is at the moment they've acquired about 150.
Oh, great. So they're making headway. Wow.
They're making some headway. They still don't have enough to be able to start construction. The people from the contractor that they've contracted with to start the construction basically says, well, we need to get some more properties because we don't have quite enough yet to really make it make sense for us to get down and start actually doing something. Now, you also have to understand what they're going to be building right now. They're not going to be laying any track. That's going to be phase 3, I believe they're talking about. What they are going to be doing is essentially putting down essentially the substrate on which the track would eventually get laid. But they've got 2 more sections after this one to build before they'd actually be able to put any track down, and so they're probably not going to get even any track laid by the time runs out for them in 2017. So
if you see this, I see this, can a judge say this is not the bond? Just simply say, here's what the people voted on. This is not what they voted on. I'm invalidating it. Or is it there's a lot of politics going on above and beyond that?
Well, the problem is, the question is exactly what did the bond promise the voters? So the bond didn't promise the voters any specific date on which this would be done. I mean, there were dates that were thrown around. There were dates in the put in the handbook, the voters' handbook. It says, well, we're going to have the first segment done by 2020. That's what it said in the voter handbook. Well, it's not in the ballot measure itself. This is one of the rules that we've learned out of this: is don't trust what you read in the voter handbook. Do not trust anything that anybody tells you about the bond measure. Only trust what's actually in the text of the bond measure, and even then, be careful.
Boy,
because
it's maddening.
As we learned already once, again, this judge invalidated part of what they had done. They had put through the legislature had passed what's called a funding plan.
Yep.
That was what was going to be funding the first $6 billion, and it was challenged because the bond measure said you've got to be able to show this and this and this before you approve a funding plan, and they hadn't. They basically had to show where's the money coming from for the first usable segment. Well, that's $31 billion. They've got $6 billion. You can do the math, figure out there's a big gap there.
What amazes me is that...
And so the trial court said, you're right. They have not satisfied the requirements of the bond measure, and he says that funding plan's got to go out the window. The Court of Appeal turned around and says, no, the funding plan's okay because it wasn't the final funding plan.
Oh, gee, So we can be bonds can be written in a way that they can suck us into saying yes, vote for something, and then it's bait and switch, basically.
Well, yeah, it's saying buyer beware. Before
Hey, Stuart,
you vote for a bond measure, you better read it through 3 times and talk to a lawyer about it.
Hold on for one more second because I want to put on some calls with you, okay?
Sure.
Some people want to talk. It is maddening. It's our money, and it's been misrepresented, and yet look what's happening now. How much rail has been laid? None. And they should have started years ago. And how much money is it going to cost? 5 times, 10 to who knows? I mean, it's like building an apartment, saying it's $12 million. Oh no, it's $30 million. Oh no, it's $70 million. Oh no, it's 120, and you're in for it just because I didn't guess right. Talk Radio 790 KBC. Peter Tilden Live continues. Peter Tilden Live continues with Stuart Flashman, who's trying to fight the bullet train. Can we take a call real quick, Stuart? We only have a minute and a half or so. Barbara, what did you want to say?
I want to ask a question. If I don't understand all the legal issues of the bond measure, but if I don't think it's a priority, and we do have this water problem that is a big priority. Why can't they change it in Sacramento?
It's a good question. It's a very good question, Barbara, and I'm sure Stuart can answer that. Wait a minute. My engineer is yelling, why can't we do desalination plants? Why can't they take the billion and use it?
And the problem is because we voted on the bond measure, and
Right.
one of the rules about bond measures, you can't use the bond money for anything except what was voted on by the voters.
Right. So you're trying to invalidate it with 45 seconds left. You're trying to invalidate it by saying legally we did not get what we paid for, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
How close are you getting?
Well, we are still fighting about what evidence we get to produce and introduce in court, and we'll hear about that in July, and then we're looking at probably an actual hearing date on the merits sometime early this fall.
Good luck, Stuart. Anything you need from us, any word you got to get out to the public, because I think people should be marching up there like the villagers in Frankenstein and say we've been well, it's a bad precedent that we're setting. It's billions of dollars here, but that's what's worse is the next bond that comes along. It shows people we can manipulate the bond in such a way.
Well, I know, and that's what we tried to get this California Supreme Court on, exactly that basis, that you're giving bonds a black eye here.
It's a dangerous thing. It's is it stuflash.tripod.com? Is that it?
Yeah.
stuflash.tripod.com.